My husband cheated on me with my sister, but I got up and built the life of my dreams. I never imagined I would feel my world crumble in a single afternoon. I was at the peak of my career, finally earning the promotion I'd fought for years, and it seemed like everything was falling into place. But that day, amidst applause and hugs from colleagues, I heard a comment that froze me. My husband, Leonardo, was cheating on me with my sister Sophia. The impact was so overwhelming I could barely breathe. I sat at my desk, my heart racing, feeling as if I were falling into a deep, bottomless pit. Shame and humiliation mixed with anger, and my mind spun in circles trying to comprehend what was happening. Every detail of that moment was etched in my memory. Sophia's knowing smile, Leonardo's evasive gaze, and that horrible feeling of betrayal so close, so intimate. It was as if everything I knew had been ripped away from me, and the pain felt physical, a pressure crushing my chest. I could feel my mouth dry, my hands trembling, and a desperate urge to run, to escape it all. But I couldn't. I had to face it, even without knowing how. And there, in that moment, I realized my life had changed forever. My name is Isabella. I'm 29 years old, and until then, I lived in a marriage I believed was solid, a balanced and comfortable life. I'd always dedicated myself to my career, my investments, and maintaining my independence. But I thought my love and trust in my marriage were enough to protect my personal world. Realizing that all of this was an illusion was devastating. For months, I relived every detail, every conversation, every gesture that now made sense in a cruel light. I felt betrayed by the one I loved most and at the same time by my own naivete. I wondered how I hadn't noticed the signs, how I'd let my sister come so close to destroying my life. Anger burned inside me, mixed with a sadness so deep it made me cry in the bathroom at work, hidden from everyone. And at the same time, I felt a pang of fear for the future, for what would become of me alone, without him, without the family I believed I had. Every night was a battle against destructive thoughts, and each morning seemed heavier than the last. I wanted to scream, but my voice failed. I wanted to cry, but tears weren't enough to ease the pain. After the initial shock, a wave of despair washed over me. I considered giving up everything, abandoning my career, fleeing a life that seemed to have no meaning. I felt weak, betrayed, powerless. Anger and fear consumed me, and the shame of being publicly humiliated paralyzed me. For days, I felt like disappearing, like erasing my very existence. But there was a voice inside me telling me not to give in, that I couldn't allow Leonardo and Sophia's betrayal to define who I was. I remembered what I'd always believed. My strength lies within myself, in my intelligence, and my ability to act. It was then that I realized that, despite the pain, I still had control over my life and my assets, thanks to a prenuptial agreement I'd signed 4 years earlier, completely ignored by everyone. This memory ignited a spark of hope. For the first time in days, I took a deep breath and began to think, they may have betrayed me, but they can't take away everything I've worked so hard to build. I decided I wouldn't be defeated. I called Helena, my trusted lawyer, and began carefully mapping out each step. This wouldn't be blind revenge, but planned justice. I spent days reviewing documents, consulting experts, learning how to protect every investment, every share I owned. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with determination. Each call with Helena strengthened me. Each strategy I devised made me feel that, even emotionally broken, I still had power. I felt vulnerable, but also awakened to a reality that demanded action, not just tears. I didn't want to simply survive the betrayal. I wanted to transform this pain into freedom and growth. The process was exhausting. I faced moments of near give-up, sleepless nights, crying fits in the silence of my apartment, memories of happy times with Leonardo that now overwhelmed me. The anger, frustration, and sense of loss were physical. My head throbbed, my chest burned, and at times I wondered if I could go on. But there were also small victories, learning to breathe deeply, to write detailed plans, to position myself with firmness and grace. Each step reminded me that I could still choose my destiny. I learned that pain isn't weakness, it's fuel if you know how to use it. I remember perfectly the day I finally confronted Leonardo and Sophia. My heart was racing, my mouth was dry, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a mixture of fear, anger, and a determination I barely recognized in myself. I took a deep breath before entering the room, remembering every piece of Helena's advice. Maintain composure, speak clearly, leaving no room for improvisations that could harm me. When I saw them, I felt a pang of contempt, not for them, but for the situation they'd created. The shame I'd imagined I'd feel vanished. In its place was a cold, calculated strength. Every word I spoke in that moment was measured. Every gesture conveyed confidence. And even though they tried to intimidate me, I realized that the vulnerability I'd felt before had transformed into quiet power. In that moment, I understood that facing what hurts us most requires courage, but also planning. After the confrontation, there was a period of uncertainty. Leonardo and Sophia tried to manipulate me, question my sanity, and pressure me emotionally. There were days when I felt on the verge of collapse, with anxiety attacks and thoughts that made me doubt myself. But I had Helena and a solid plan. Every call, every meeting, every document reviewed reminded me that I wasn't alone and that my efforts would bear fruit. I began to study more about investments, law, and finance, things I had previously considered secondary. And, little by little, I realized that my financial independence wasn't just a protection, but a path to my emotional freedom. The feeling of being in control of my own life began to replace the fear that had previously paralyzed me. The hardest moment, however, was accepting that my sister Sophia, whom I had loved and trusted my entire life, had betrayed me so profoundly. Feeling angry at her was inevitable, but there was also a quiet sadness, almost a mourning, for the relationship we had. I remembered every shared secret, every laugh, every hug, and now it all felt like a memory from another life. It was painful to accept that some people we love can cause irreparable pain, but acceptance was necessary. It was at that point that I realized I couldn't change her choices, but I could choose how I reacted. Every tear I shed, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt were part of the process that prepared me to rebuild my life, without resentment, but with clear boundaries. I began to focus on my career like never before. Meetings, projects, and professional challenges became my escape valve, and at the same time, my battlefield. I learned to say no, to set boundaries, to not accept disrespect, and to protect my assets more rigorously. Each professional achievement was a silent victory, a reminder that I was capable of growth even after being humiliated. A sense of personal power began to replace the pain. My body felt lighter, my heart less heavy, and my mind more focused. And little by little, I realized that my identity was no longer tied to Leonardo or Sophia, but to myself. While rebuilding my financial and emotional life, I also had to deal with the loneliness the betrayal left behind. There were moments of doubt. Would it be possible to trust again? Find someone who respected my boundaries? Every encounter, every attempt at friendship or relationship was a test. But I realized that, first and foremost, I needed to be whole with myself. This process was painful because it required brutal honesty with my feelings and patience with myself. I learned to value my own company, to recognize my achievements, and not to depend emotionally on anyone. And when I least expected it, I began to feel the lightness of someone who has found balance and strength again, without rushing, without fear of reinventing themselves. One of the moments that most impacted me was realizing that Leonardo and Sophia would truly not have access to my assets. I felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. For years, I had built each achievement with effort, nights of study, sacrifice, and discipline, and the thought that they could simply take everything was unbearable. But there was the security that the prenuptial agreement had given me. I remember sitting alone in the living room, my heart still racing, and feeling the first wave of victory. Silent, almost timid, but deeply satisfying. Every document Helena reviewed, every legal step we took was a reminder that I didn't need to cry alone or despair. I was finally learning that protection and knowledge are powerful weapons against injustice. Even with this security, the emotional wounds were still raw and deep. There were days when I would cry upon waking, remembering the betrayal, the cynicism in their eyes, the feeling of public humiliation that haunted me. But I began to realize that my suffering didn't have to be eternal. Little by little, I introduced small self-care, routines, morning runs, balanced meals, meditation, and therapy. Each simple gesture was a form of reconstruction, a way to reconnect with my own body and mind. And even though there were still moments of pain, I began to feel like I could control the narrative of my life. I was no longer just the betrayed woman. I was the woman who refused to be defeated. My career grew exponentially. I took on complex projects, negotiated important contracts, and began investing in opportunities I previously considered risky. I remember feeling, at an investor meeting, adrenaline mixed with satisfaction. I was building something solid and real, based on my intelligence and hard work, without relying on anyone. Each financial step was a silent but extremely powerful victory, and the feeling of independence was liberating. I no longer needed Leonardo's recognition or Sophia's approval. I learned that financial freedom isn't just about money, but about decision-making power and self-respect. Rebuilding also involved my heart. I needed to learn to trust again. It wasn't easy. Every time I met someone new, I felt the weight of distrust. But over time, I realized that true love doesn't hurt, humiliate, or manipulate. When I met Daniel, I felt something different: balance, respect, and genuine partnership. It wasn't the overwhelming passion of the beginning. It was something solid, based on conversations, mutual support, and shared values. And for the first time in years, I felt I could relax, laugh without fear, and dream again. My heart, even wounded, could still open to what was right. Despite all the progress, there were times when I found myself reflecting on my own vulnerability. I remembered lonely nights, the smell of the empty apartment, the crushing silence after a fight with Leonardo. But I realized that pain, when faced with courage, turns into learning. Every tear, every painful memory, every feeling of helplessness fueled my growth. Today, I can look back without anger, but with understanding. Everything that happened shaped me, taught me to be stronger, more cautious, and more resilient. And finally, I realized that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone but myself. One of the most difficult challenges was dealing with the reactions of those around me. Friends, colleagues, and family were curious, judgmental, or even complicit in Leonardo and Sophia's situation. I felt a mixture of anger and shame. Why was my personal life becoming everyone's business? But I realized I couldn't control what others thought, only my actions. I began to filter relationships, distancing myself from toxic people and drawing closer to those who truly supported my recovery and growth. This selection process was painful because it involved cutting old ties, but it was also liberating. I realized that when we rebuild ourselves, it's necessary to protect our space, our energy, and learn to value those who truly deserve to be by our side. Another profound learning experience came with the realization of how much I needed to prioritize my emotional well-being. For years, I'd put work and my marriage above all else, ignoring internal signals that something was wrong. Now, every decision was considered according to my limits and needs. I learned to say no without guilt, and to establish clear rules in relationships, both professional and personal. I discovered that empathy doesn't mean allowing others to overstep our boundaries. This shift in perspective brought an inner strength I'd never felt before. I no longer depended on external approval and could act according to my values and principles. Financial growth also became a form of therapy. Every investment, every successful negotiation, every signed contract reminded me that my life would no longer be defined by what I lost, but by what I gained. I began to track my own progress with pride, celebrating small victories and learning from mistakes without beating myself up. I remember sleepless nights, reviewing numbers and strategies, feeling my heart race with each successful decision. It was a different kind of adrenaline rush than I'd felt in the past. Now it was pleasurable, constructive, and healthy. I began to feel that, even with the pain, a new version of myself was emerging, stronger, more confident, and more prepared for life's challenges. Memories of public humiliation and betrayal still lingered, but now they were observed from a distance. Instead of paralyzing me, they served as reminders of my resilience. I began writing about my experiences in a journal, recording not only the events but also my emotions and reflections. This exercise helped me organize my thoughts, understand patterns, and perceive my growth. And gradually, the pain began to transform into learning. I remember one night, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, feeling my body relax for the first time in months, and I realized, I am alive, I am whole, and I can move forward without relying on anyone. The relationship with Daniel brought lightness, but it also required me to confront my insecurities. I had to learn to trust again, to open up without fear of being hurt. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared challenge was a test of my patience, maturity, and ability to love without losing my self-worth. It was a gradual but necessary process. Today, I can feel love without fear, joy without guilt, and connection without depending on external approval. This experience taught me that rebuilding isn't just about overcoming trauma, but about growing consciously, taking care of yourself, and recognizing that we deserve relationships that lift us up, not diminish us. Today, looking back, I still feel a pang of pain when I remember what Leonardo and Sophia did, but that pain no longer defines me. It's simply a reminder that I survived, that I fought, and that I recovered. I learned that intense pain is temporary when faced with courage and forethought. I realized that even when the world seems to be falling apart, it's possible to find strength within yourself that you never knew existed. Every challenge taught me patience. Every tear taught me resilience. And every fear I faced showed me that emotional and financial freedom is possible, even after the greatest betrayal. Rebuilding my life wasn't immediate. There were days of tears, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt when I wondered if I would ever be able to truly smile. But it was in those moments that I discovered my own power. I began to value my achievements, set clear boundaries, and surround myself with people who lifted me up, not diminished me. I discovered that happiness doesn't come just from achieving goals, but from feeling safe, respected, and able to live without fear of being betrayed again. This learning changed the way I view relationships, my career, and my personal life. The love I found with Daniel was unlike anything I'd experienced before. He respects my limits, supports my decisions, and shares responsibility. There's no manipulation, no games, just partnership. This taught me that true love is light, not suffocating. I learned that trusting again is possible, but it's necessary to make conscious choices and not repeat old patterns. With him, I built a relationship based on equality, respect, and mutual growth, something that previously seemed impossible after so much disappointment. Reflecting on everything, I realized that overcoming adversity isn't just about protecting yourself or defeating someone, but about transforming pain into learning. My life today is built on conscious choices, clear boundaries, and strengthened self-esteem. I've learned that, even after the worst betrayal, it's possible to rebuild yourself, thrive, and find genuine happiness. Nothing and no one can take away from you what you've achieved with effort, intelligence, and courage. I'm living proof that pain can become fuel for growth, freedom, and personal victory. If I could leave a message for anyone going through a similar moment, it would be simple. Don't give up on yourself. Trust your strength, protect yourself, learn from the pain, and build your life with purpose. The path is difficult, but it is possible. I still carry scars, but they remind me of my strength and inspire me to move forward with courage. Betrayal destroyed me for a moment, but it rebuilt me into someone who knows their worth, recognizes their power, and isn't afraid to face the world. And in the end, that is liberating.